were able to seed some questions here in the audience, so before you guys, someone has to go first, so that first person is going to be me. The first question to the entire panel is, how does the success of the lakefront plan benefit the rest of the community? I know that's a big one to start out with, but that's where we'll start.
Anyone first? Marion.
I think I would just start by saying, it's not just about the east-west connections, it's really about the north-south connections. As Joyce mentioned, 80% of the land along the lakefront is not publicly accessible. We know that people are within a 10-minute walk. How do we safely get them to the lakefront and then let them know that there is a way? We've got transit stations at 117th. How do you get from Madison 117th all the way to the lakefront safely, whether bike, walk, whatever it may be? So, NOACA's looked at the regional TLCI study and looking at some of those north-south streets. County Public Works, there are a lot of north-south county routes. How can we be intentional about our planning when we're doing resurfacing and we're doing other projects that we're providing both bike and pedestrian amenities to those routes?
Very quickly, ecotourism. When you look at how many jobs are tied to the recreation, whether it's fishing, whether it's travel and tourism, Dave Gilbert's here, this is a huge draw for this community. It's the X factor that we need to continue to exploit moving forward. So that's why it's beneficial for the entire community.
My functional answer is that downtown Cleveland as a neighborhood brings in 60% of the city's revenue. So it is important to focus on activating our downtown and North Coast lakefront in a way that benefits, through that center city attraction. But I think also, the Cleveland region, we just deserve good lakefront access. And our people are so hardworking. We deserve an opportunity to really form that relationship with our lake.
I'm just going to go from neighborhood to a more binational perspective, and that is the 20% of the world's fresh water supply that you referenced, Joyce. That's where it's going to be for us in the future, is these 8 states across the Great Lakes and the Canadian provinces. We are going to see migration to our region, and the question is, are we ready? Can we capitalize on it? Can we really leverage it to our future advantage? And one shout back to APA in advance today, the regional partners that came out today, congratulations from city to county to multiple counties, our state legislators that are here, guy who built this place, Dick Pace. This is the partnership right out in the audience, but we have got to promote, to Brian's point, a strategy. Ecotourism's one of them, but it's also about our stewardship responsibility and then ultimately the migration that's going to occur right here.
What Joyce said. Next question.
We have a question over here, sir.
So there is one
First,
other.
could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
Dale Miller, Cuyahoga County Council District 2. And there is one other very large planning effort that's going on right now, which is the NOACA 5-county climate action plan. And I would like to hear the comments of the panel on that planning effort and how it relates to what we're trying to do at the lakefront.
I guess I can start. Well, first, I'm happy they put the words climate change and climate justice back into the plan, by the way. That's very important. And, as the county executive mentioned in our earlier conversation, you don't get the EPA and the Clean Water Act without the work that we did, Carl B. Stokes did, right here in Cleveland, Ohio. And so we want to make sure as we embark on this regional planning effort with the county support that we center all the work we're doing around how we can take advantage of not only the Inflation Reduction Act, but the bipartisan infrastructure bill as well, too. And in my conversations with the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, his direct comments to me was, Mayor Bibb, your lakefront screams infrastructure, 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 but also climate resiliency. And so all the innovations that we need to spur around water innovation and the emerging water economy, that's really a part of how we make sure we have good green jobs and be a leading driver of the next era of climate innovation. And I think the work we're doing around that plan will go a long way to get that done.
I think also, when you look, the Cleveland Metro Park is 106 years old, so you look at a century of stewardship, most of the rest in this area are not very far behind. There's over 80,000 acres of preserved green space that's in these regional park systems, and I would argue a world-class national park. So we can't look short-sighted on what's actually been done to this point. Just think if they weren't here. Just think if the Metro Park systems didn't exist, where we'd actually be. So I think we can be able to capitalize on that. This region needs a very strong voice. All you have to do is look at the heat maps every morning on the news. We are truly blessed where we're at, but let's figure out how to capitalize it and move this area forward.
And I would just say that, NOAC has recently engaged a consultant to really get more public input on the climate action plan. So if you haven't heard anything yet, please do check their website. They are moving meetings around all 5 counties. I know there's one, I believe, at Tri-C, August 17th. Don't quote me on that, but there are platforms that we all want people's input to this process. So we don't want, again, force something in that, something needs to get more input.
Joyce? No. Okay. Question? I've got one in the meantime. Chris, you alluded, I think without naming it, the Great Lakes Compact, which is an agreement between the 8 states on this side of the border and the 2 provinces on the other side to not export water out of the watershed. Anyone here want to comment on that in relation to the climate
Yeah,
question?
I mean, this is a matter where leaders matter. Hearkening back to a visit we took to Sharm el-Sheikh with the Cleveland and Gun Foundation in November, all eyes on the Great Lakes states. I mean, people do not know where Cuyahoga County is, city of Cleveland, state of Ohio. They know where the Great Lakes are from around the world. So that alone, struck me right away how much stewardship responsibility we have. The governors of those states are going to be here in October. Let's crash the party. Let's talk about the importance of these Great Lakes. I think we have some who are among the converted and some who have work to do. Let me give a couple of specifics. On this Freshwater Institute idea, I want to get education, advocacy, and research out quickly in this town, working with the mayor and others. But point source pollutants, particularly fertilizer from farming, is causing problems that we've got to get to the legislature and say, this is all of our problem. There are better products. Scott's is one of them that's actually created a cleaner product that is not causing toxins out here. So we got to deal with that. Plastic particulates. I'm proud of whomever decided to have glassware and cardboard today rather than the usual suspect, right? And kudos, let's lead by best practice. But to get to these governors and say, to Steve's question, why is Joliet the example where they can divert from the city of Chicago to Joliet, Illinois, and take water out of our Great Lakes watershed? The new water war, and hopefully it will not be that, but if there is one, it's going to unfortunately be about water and diversion. Look what's happening in the Colorado River Basin, and there is going to be, especially as population has migrated south and west, that draw on us, and the only ones who can stand up to it is us, with our governors, our legislators, and hopefully some competent voices in Washington.
Something worth fighting for. Thank you. Question?
Now, I will get to you in a second. Before we get to
Okay.
that question, I promised Mayor Bibb I would get him off in time so he can get to his 2 o'clock. So one more time for Mayor Bibb.
Thank you so much.
Just what your name is.
Hi, Erin Blair, City of Sandusky. I'm curious if you talk a little bit more about community engagement. So you talked about how important it is, and I absolutely agree. And we're also talking about collaborating with our policymakers. And sometimes during the planning process, we all come up with this vision and we have buy-in, but throughout the implementation process, the policymakers hear from some individuals and coalitions who really just are speaking against a project or everything that you're trying to do. And that's who's calling them more often. So could you talk about strategies to keep them on the vision and remind them what we're doing to implement?
I can jump in with that. And I think it's really important to be really honest upfront about trade-offs. And part of this initiative that we're diving into in this part of the year, the later part of the planning process, is this idea of being very realistic about well-being and the trade-offs, because I think a lot of people are sold on a big vision, and all of us need to recognize that there are realities, right? And so whether it's, maybe you won't be able to drive your car across the land bridge to the lakefront, or, maybe you're going to have to go 35 miles per hour or less. And I think that understanding those trade-offs, but really kind of understanding the deep concern up front helps, right? As we're working together to understand deep concerns, some of them are very legitimate, not wanting to be cut off from access or things like that. So I think ultimately part of it is the process and the strategy of that, of saying, all right, up front, we're going to make sure we hear the voices that may come up against this particular project, but also to see the benefits up front. And we always say this because we come up against this a lot with Planning Commission, is that there are many inputs. Our community is not monolithic. People will have opinions about everything, and not everyone's gonna be on the same page, but we are taking the best available data, both from stories, from quantitative data, from our GIS maps, and making the best decisions that we can for the future. And so I think that's how I would respond to that.
And I would just say engaging your local, state, all the officials that you can to be aware of your project. Invite them to the project site. Let them see what is being envisioned and what it is, because with their support, and I think your local elected can help drive that message when they are looking at funding and advocacy.
Bring them down to that Euclid Trail.
Just a
Yes, sir.
fun story. I told Chris Quinn I was looking for an opportunity to say this. When planners listen, planners learn. I loved what Joyce had to say about meeting people where they're at. And Annie Pease just recently hosted with the Public Works team on the Detroit Superior Bridge a dinner as we planned the future of the Detroit Superior Bridge, Veterans Memorial Bridge. We had dinner with our residents, right? But I did want to
Annie
tell you,
Pease, who is
she's our transportation senior advisor. So we are grateful to have her. But I have to tell a story. Debbie Berry reminded me it's the 20th anniversary of the launch of the Waterfront District Plan. Tomorrow is the 20th anniversary. We had 5,000 comments, 300 public meetings, but the one that was a lot of fun among many fun ones was when we got a call from folks from Toledo, Buffalo, and Erie and beyond, the other lakefront communities, and they wanted to meet one night to tell us something that was wrong with our plan. So we met them, I think it was somewhere over in the warehouse district, and we rolled the plan out over a pool table and said, "What's up?" And they said, "We're all surfers, and you're breaking our fetch." And I said, well, "What the hell's a fetch?" I had to learn what surfing was all about. Well, we had a little finger pier that jutted out of the Edgewater Park into their fetch. And if you've ever noticed, on the right day, there is some great surfing at Edgewater Park. We didn't want to break their fetch, so we pulled it out of the plan. We listened to those who came from many other cities to come to our city to surf. And they're still surfing out there.
And that's why the island is going to be over in the Cheers side.
There you go.
Yeah, I actually want to point out, hopefully we're doing justice with the Intercity Yacht Club and the Cheers plan where, with your help, you're able to share with the Metro Parks team and the port and other partners what would help aid the, and I'm not going to be very technical about this, but your ship move as the island is being built. And that knowledge was essential to the formation of the next iteration of the design.
Next question. We have
time for one more. Lauren, I'll get you right over there.
Yeah.
Hi,
Never mind, I'll get you. How about that?
You got it.
thank you. I'm Tom Bullock from Lakewood City Council, and we appreciate being invited on a regional basis because it's probably going to be through not just Cleveland, but greater Cleveland, Plaindeal, or that readership that we're going to get some of these things done. We try to do our part in Lakewood. There's one lakefront regional planning project that's been paused, and I'm curious to hear whether the leaders here think it could go through, and that's the Icebreaker Wind Project, now hosted at the Cleveland Port, which will remain presumably an industrial area. It's a strong institution that's doing a lot of good for the region. They're doing some exciting electrification plans for their facilities. And you've got the promise of launching a whole industry, which could then be a clean industry that also drives economic growth and development that's also compatible with all the clean water goals that the speakers have been talking about. So can we persist and make that happen?
I just saw that Ron Richard stepped outside of the room, and that really was a vision that Ron Richard carried, and he spoke about it as he wraps up his tenure at the Cleveland Foundation. And one of the things that stood out to me is, the studies are done, like all the data is available, and it takes our state's will to move into the next phase here. And so I think all of us together, ought to be keeping that in the forefront of this whole new industry that could revitalize a lot of our manufacturing, right? As Ron put it, we know how to bend steel, and so can we bring it into the next phase? So your advocacy, our advocacy works here.
Yeah, I just a couple things. One, we announced at the State of the County the launch of Cuyahoga Green Energy, which is already got a good start as a microgrid. I'm looking at the Mayor of Euclid, who's been an early adopter. Thank you, and council, thank you. But I would say that that's a future portfolio contributor. The thing about wind turbine technology is it's ever changing, and we've got to keep up with it. We've got to keep pace with it. I'm intrigued by the floatable stanchions that are now out there in other places. Begins to ameliorate some of the debates about location, and if they're movable, they're not as difficult for people. But I think we should look at the technology and quickly get onto it. But Joyce is absolutely right. It's going to take some state navigation alongside it.
Right, well, I think that wraps it up for our discussion today. Again, thank you to Advance Ohio and the American Planning Association for this conversation. And one more time, let's hear it for our great panelists. Thank you.
Let's also give it up for Stephen Litt, please. One more time for him. Thank you, friends. As Stephen said, we also want to thank the American Planning Association and the APA Ohio chapter for putting today together, is what I want to say. Planners see a broader view that can create an adaptive, flexible, long-term vision to achieve current and long-term goals. That's what we've been talking about for the last hour and a half. We have some great folks here for you to connect with, and we also urge you to connect with planners in your area to help build those communities together. And with that, have a wonderful day. We'll see you again soon.